Chapter 22. The Academy of Berlin. Excitement filled the Gewandhaus while Felix was in a sweat at the conducting desk. The orchestra was presenting Robert Schumann's Spring Symphony. Clara Schumann had begged her husband to compose a symphony, so Robert complied, as he loved his wife ever so. The date of the premiere couldn't have fit the music any better, happening in the spring on March 31st, 1841. The music gave way to a floral essence of blossoms blooming in the awakening of warm weather. With Felix's help and the cooperative audience, the music went over well. When the last chord echoed through the Gewandhaus, there was a moment of silence. It was not until Felix turned around that the crowd gave a handsome applause. Felix looked up at Robert, who was sitting in one of the boxes along with Clara. Their faces gleamed with smiles. Felix bowed, then gestured towards Robert, giving credit. The concert was one to remember. In returning home from the afternoon concert, Felix was welcomed by 3-year-old Carl, who dashed for a hug. 2-year-old Marie crawled about. Cecil then came, holding the newest family member, little Paul. Felix gave Cecil a smooch, then admired the baby, named after his brother. He deemed his growing family to be the best he could wish for. But in somberness, Felix sighed. "I must go pack. Berlin awaits." He headed towards the bedroom. Cecil followed him, still holding the child. "Felix, must you listen to that Herr Massau? I know his letter had importance, but must you go? Herr Massau is a correspondent of the King of Prussia. I can't ignore his requests. What he writes are the king's wishes. I'm evidently the director of this academy that doesn't exist yet, so I am to help get it organized." Felix continued packing for an early morning leave. Cecil said no more, only giving a sigh. A long carriage ride later to Berlin. The coachman parked the horses at Leipziger Strasse No. 3. The estate looked the same as always, settled in its quiet neighborhood with its sense of home. Felix exited the coach and entered the estate to be greeted overwhelmingly by Leah. "Mein son, you're getting too old. I can't believe you're my 32-year-old child." "Love you, Mutter," Felix embraced. His mother had aged, but in good sense. Though the outside of the home appeared the same, the inside felt hollow. Coming back wasn't the same after Abraham's death. Felix rather wished to be with his wife and children. After settling in his old room, he came back downstairs. His brother Paul happened to be home and greeted Felix in the parlor with a sigh of relief. "I'm so glad you decided to come." "I'm glad to be with family." Felix didn't sound enthralled. He then turned to see a dark-haired man sitting in the chair closest to the fireplace. He appeared ambitious, with his hands full of various formal papers. "This is Herr Massau," Paul introduced. Felix didn't know the man's true personality, but the fact that he was sitting in his father's old chair didn't help with first impressions. In greeting, Massau stood and shook Felix's hand. "I'm eager to start our business right away. It is the king's wishes that these plans are fulfilled in capital timing." "All right, but may a tree of tea be set? I'm weary from travel." "Of course. I could use a cuppa myself," Massau replied. Paul sent a maid to do the task. Felix sat on a couch as Massau returned to the chair. Paul pulled up another chair beside the coffee table. When tea was set, Massau initiated the meeting. "These here are the proposals that the king has organized thus far." He set the papers on the coffee table. There were many contracts, all of them concerning Felix. One contained the proposal of terms, deeming him future director and Kapellmeister of the future academy. Another discussed the pre-salary of $3,000 and other money concerns. The last held the plan of action to form the academy, but it wasn't descriptive. "If you sign the contract concerning your salary, the king will pay the said pre-amount straight away," Massau explained. "Let me look at this more." Felix skimmed the contract. Towards the bottom, a term of agreement was printed small and fine. It stated that if he signed, he was to keep in Berlin for a year. With that, he was risking his job at the Gewandhaus and his family's welfare in Leipzig. "I don't think I want to sign." Felix felt pressure as Massau handed him a pen. Paul gave input. "I know a year sounds like a lot, but it will go by fast. Your family will be happy in Berlin. The city will have much to offer. $3,000 will do you good." "It's a proposal of the king," Herr Massau persuaded further. Felix took the pen in hesitation. He held it over the empty line. In the midst of the suspense, he set the pen down. "I cannot agree to this contract. However, I do intend to help get this academy organized. It seems that the king doesn't know what is all needed, so I shall make a list." "I have blank paper." Massau handed him a leaf. Felix spoke as he wrote the list. "This is for the music department, as that is what my duty is to help put together. There must be a head teacher of composition, a head for solo singing, a head for choral singing, and a head for pianoforte playing. Also teachers for the history of art and music. These courses of study are to last 3 years, and every winter a certain number of concerts are to take place. I want the instruction to be top-notch and technical perfection in art." Herr Massau watched Felix write the requirements and felt a bit overwhelmed. The king most likely had not thought of all the technicalities. After Felix finished the paper, Massau put it in his folio and went on his way. The days passed after the conference, and Felix found himself aimlessly lounging around. He thought his stay to be pointless, but Leah enjoyed every second of his company. Paul only visited when Massau returned with the king's instruction. It was in the form of a letter. As Felix read His Majesty's writing, Massau summarized, "He is letting you off for the time being, so you may go back to Leipzig. He will request you back once things progress. He still wishes you to sign for the salary, so adjusted the terms. The year-long stay does not apply." "All right." Felix took a pen and signed the contract, earning him $3,000. With that, Felix left Berlin, hoping he didn't make any foolish moves. "You did what?" Cecil had a fit of fury. Felix sat at the dining table, his hands rubbing his throbbing head. He had told Cecil that he signed the contract. She snapped, "You are tied up to the king's orders now that he has paid you. I bet in a few months' time he will make you go back and stay, forcing us to move there." "I'm sorry, honey, I was careful. But when the terms were eased, it sounded good. I thought a few extra thalers would be nice." "A few extra thalers? A few extra? He paid you 3,000. A little too good to be true. With that amount, he'll expect you to do whatever he wishes." "He knows I have a family and life. I'm sure he'll be flexible. He is a king. He does whatever he wants. Personally, I don't think he will request me back for a while. He thought he had an academy going, but I made a list inquiring what he actually needed. I have many doubts on who, if anyone, will fill those positions." Felix distracted his thoughts by holding his child Paul, but gave a sigh as his wife headed for the bedroom in somberness. Felix handed little Paul to Johann, as he needed to talk to Cecil. When following her to the bedroom, she ignored him. Felix pursued to make amends. "Cecil, I am sure things will work out. I do want to stay here." "Felix, stop. I am not in the mood." She put her hand in his face. Talk to the hand. "Cecil, bitte, we need to talk." Felix gave her puppy eyes. Cecil crossed her arms, but it didn't last long as her husband's expression warmed her heart. She sighed in despair. "Oh, what am I to do with you?" Given an array of kisses, Felix showered her in short smooshes. Cecil smiled as it made her feel loved. Her temper dispersed, and their amends were made. It was not until after the spring and the majority of the summer that the month of August brought the unwanted call back to Berlin. It was just as Cecil had predicted. Herr Massau sent a notice that King Frederick William wanted to meet Felix face-to-face on the matter of the progressing academy. In packing, Felix laid out various outfits, toiletries, and music. He made sure to pack extra necessities as he feared the king would make him stay in Berlin for a long stretch of time. Before leaving, the family assembled in the dining room to give their farewells. Felix first turned to Johann. "Take good care of everyone." "You have not a thing to worry about," Johann assured. Felix gave his wife and children parting hugs and kisses. Little Marie clung to her father's ankle as Karl wrapped his arms around his legs, begging, "Papa, stay." "My darlings," Felix bent down to them, "I have to be gone a while, but I shall be back in due time. I will write much and be back in the blink of an eye." He then stood up and looked to Cecil, who was holding little Paul. She had tears, knowing he wouldn't be back so soon. Felix's eyes dewed. This is the sourest apple a man can eat. With that, he turned for the door. Karl frantically followed his father, but Johann picked the boy up, trying to comfort him. The child's desperate cries echoed through the apartment halls. Each step down the stairs felt like a knife to the heart for Felix. He had to fight the tugging strings of love that begged to calm his baby. Leaving by carriage only worsened the feeling, as the clapping of the horse's hooves felt like pounds at his chest, longing to stay. Why would Felix come back? He is too busy adhering to the orders of the King of Prussia, a flautist stated. A hornist added, I heard he was paid a great sum. Gentlemen, I've rummaged some chords on my violin. The chatter halted, and the musicians looked towards me. I had taken up the task of watching over the Gewandhaus during Felix's absence. The musicians had their doubts, so I tried to calm their gossip. I don't think we should be quick to make assumptions. Felix has not given me word of his resignation. He is only in Berlin as he must obey the king. That doesn't mean he intended to be there in the first place. The musicians shrugged in the moment, and rehearsals carried on. Herr Sleinitz and Hauser both still had the expressions of worry. So after rehearsals I mentioned privately, I received a letter from Felix. He believes nothing will become of anything in Berlin, as no one can make up their minds. They are having the most difficult time in finding instructors, not only in the music department, but also the other subjects. As long as you are willing to fill in for him, we have your word, Hauser stated. I nodded, hoping Felix would return as soon as possible. It felt a hopeless situation, as it was the King of Prussia wavering the direction of Felix's job. It didn't take long for the weeks to become months, with the Gewandhaus still under my direction. The year of 1842 had arrived, and Felix still remained in Berlin. It was a sad sight, as Cecil brought little Karl to concerts, to give the boy and herself closure from Felix's absence. Each time his music was to be performed, they came, sitting in the same front corner seats. At one concert containing Felix's piano concerto, I entered the stage, headed for the conducting desk. Before starting the performance, I glanced at the corner seats. This time they were empty. In Berlin, Felix lazed about the parlor of the estate. He kicked back on the sofa and stared at the ceiling, studying the intricate designs, as he had nothing better to do. All was quiet and boring after having returned from the residence of King Frederick. He had called Felix to another drawn-out meeting about the non-existent Academy of Berlin. Felix at this point started to devise a plan to leave the city. He thought up excuses. The most convincing was to speak of his family, deeming it too hard to move his wife and children to a different city. He decided to use that excuse at the next meeting. Felix, Leah burst into the room ever so happy. My grandchildren are here. Oh, I'm so happy to finally meet little Paul. Why didn't you tell me Cecil was coming with them? What? Felix face-palmed, as his whole plan was ruined. Little Karl sprinted into the parlor. Papa! He jumped onto Felix's lap. Felix hugged him tightly. Cecil came, holding Marie. Oh, I am just so excited. Leah couldn't contain her joy as she held baby Paul. She then suggested, I should invite Fanny and Rebecca over with their children. I want all of my grandchildren. Paul Sr. came down the stairs, hearing the commotion. He went to see the baby Leah held. So this is the one named after me. Yeah, maybe he will grow up to be a banker just as you, Felix replied. He then turned to Cecil, his tone a tinge moody. So Johann let you come? Oh, oui. He will manage the house fine, she answered, sensing that he wasn't in complete acceptance. Paul discreetly left the parlor to go pen a letter to Herr Mossau, now knowing it was practical for Felix's family to move to Berlin. Felix caught him heading for the drawing room, so set Karl down. He caught up to his brother in the corridor. Bitte, Paul, I know you are going to write to Herr Mossau. The king not know my family is here. Herr Mossau and the king should know. Why is it any of their business? Felix protested. Paul crossed his arms. Look, I know you do not want to be here in Berlin, but it is the wish of the King of Prussia. I think you should take such a task more seriously. It would keep your family in good standing. Paul, Felix scolded, you are being a spitting image of our father right now. Stop it. Father's ideals were sensible, and you need to adhere to them. I did the best I could to please him, and I proved that I can keep a family with music. We fought so long over name and occupation. I don't care about the station. I care for my happiness, and I happen to find work that I love to support my family. Yet it could all go away because a majesty wants me here, and I am to listen because he is of high station, and will bring me a higher standing. In honesty, I'd rather reject the royal affair altogether." "Felix," Paul hit him in the shoulder, "you shouldn't speak like that. If you are this upset over it, you should discuss this to His Majesty himself. The next time he requests me, I shall say something." June 1842. I see." The man in formal attire sank deep in thought while sitting at his throne. Felix kneeled before him in a beg, fidgeting with his top hat in nervousness. He had confessed his feelings to His Majesty King Frederick on the matter of living in Berlin. It was a blunt speech, but Felix kept his stance in all properness. "My dear Mendelssohn," Frederick spoke lightly, "you know how the city needs something to better it. You grew up and belong here at heart. It would upset me if you refused to station yourself here. I mean hurt me deeply as a friend. Bitte, I have a happy occupation and home in Leipzig. It pleases me and supports my family. I need not anything more than that." Felix clasped his hands. Frederick gave a sigh, giving the direct statement. "I do not give my consent. I hate to give orders to a friend, but I cannot let you go." Felix near melted from the disheartening statement. He stood back up with a somber expression. Frederick felt bad as Felix strode towards the exit. Before he got out of sight, the king called, "Wait, come back a second." Felix returned, and Frederick grabbed a letter. He explained, "I have a cousin who now resides in England with his wife. He is a composer himself in his spare time, and he adores your music. I think it would be best if you gave this letter to him by hand. And you'll get a break from Berlin. I know you like London." "Danke." Felix brightened up. He took the letter with care. "What is the name of your cousin?" "Albert, Prince Albert, the husband of Queen Victoria." The king's information caused Felix to race out of the palace in excitement. He felt as if a cloud had been lifted. Though this trip was to be temporary, he wanted anyway to get out of Berlin. Yet on his way back to the estate, he realized that his children would have to part with both parents. It was time Cecil had seen Felix's favorite destination and met Charlotte Moscheles. To compensate, Leah would be having the time of her life with the grandchildren. When dashing through the front door of the home, he found Cecil in the parlor, knitting. Felix called from the doorway, "Pack your bags, honey. Let my mother watch the children. We are going to London." On the morning of July 14th, 1842, the high-trotting horses of a grand coach entered the grand gates, unlocking the drive to Buckingham Palace. As they clopped closer, Felix could not believe his eyes at such a scene. The yard was picturesque, let alone the palace itself. The coach parked on the fine gravel terrain. A servant dressed in fine attire opened the carriage door and gave Felix a hand upon stepping out. Once on Buckingham's grounds, he turned about in circles, distracted by it all. The servant studied Felix by the arm to escort him up the main stairs. When entering through a door, Felix turned, looking at all of the decor inside Buckingham. The servant kept guiding him until stopping at the grand gallery. There, in a comfortable chair towards the corner, sat a gentleman. For being in a royal palace, his clothes appeared on the casual side, but still formal for any commoner. A tray of tea sat at the end table beside him. His dark brown bangs slightly fell out of place whilst reading a book. Upon hearing footsteps, he looked up. "Your Majesty," the servant bowed lightly. "This is Herr Mendelssohn of Berlin. He has come to deliver a letter from King Frederick William IV. "Ah, you are Felix. I have always wanted to meet you." The man had a thick German accent. Felix discerned this to be Albert, so he bowed in introduction. "I am happy to give you this." He handed Albert the letter. The servant rolled his eyes at hearing Felix's accent. A mutter left his mouth. Great, another German. Albert gestured to the fickle servant to leave and invited Felix. "Bitte, sit and have tea. There is an extra cup." "So your cousin tells me you compose," Felix sat. Unlike every other time around royalty, he felt comfortable. Albert didn't seem the judging spirit. He spoke earnest of heart. "Yeah, when time allows. And I have a lot for a husband. I do work, but it's such a different concept when your wife is the one running the country. I'm always there to assist, but it feels backwards at times, as if I'm a house husband." He seemed to be venting his thoughts. Felix listened and nodded as he cared about the man's feelings. Albert continued, "I have an organ, and my wife also adores your music. You should come to dinner tomorrow evening. It would be a pleasure." Of course, Felix couldn't pass such an engagement. He had a few more sips of tea, then headed back to Chester Place, where he and Cecil were staying. The home was quite busy, with Ignaz at the keys and little Felix nearby, playing with toy soldiers, giving them sound effects as he placed them about. Charlotte, Cecil, and Emily joined in a circle of seats, knitting. Felix skipped in the midst of them. "I sent the letter to Albert, and he invited me to dinner." "When?" Cecil asked. "Tomorrow. Enjoy it. It sounds a bit too formal for us. Charlotte is taking Emily and I to the theater to watch some plays." Cecil helped Emily untangle a knot in her yarn. Felix joined Ignaz at the piano to partake in duets and improvisations. Little Felix felt a comfort whenever his father and Felix were at the piano. He couldn't help but pause his games to watch their creative minds collaborate. Deep within, he knew that he would forever remember the duo. The next afternoon, Felix sat at the piano with an array of ideas. He had much on his mind concerning the evening that was to be spent with the British monarchs. The only way to make it come sooner was to occupy himself, yet the composing occupied him a bit too much. Ignaz walked into the parlor. "Felix, aren't you to be at the palace?" "Oh, yeah." Felix jumped up from the instrument, noticing time had slipped away. Dinner at Buckingham had commenced at the hour. In a sprint, Felix got dressed into something formal. Ignaz stopped him before he left and straightened his cravat. "There, now you are presentable." "Danke." Felix raced out the door, hopping onto the nearest cab. Meanwhile, at the palace, Albert and Victoria sat at the large table with their guests. They felt in a flutter. Felix's reserved seat remained empty. Albert hoped he had not offended Felix in any way. Victoria showed an air of disappointment. She had looked ever so forward to meeting Herr Mendelssohn. Dinner ended without sight of him. The men stood as the ladies dispersed the table, including Victoria. When the men headed towards the smoking room, Albert left them in that event as usual. He preferred to be with his wife in the evenings rather than an after-dinner smoke. Victoria, Albert, and a few other ladies scattered about the parlor, drinking champagne. After the hopes of Felix coming were lost, a servant escorted him into the parlor. Albert brightened up, greeting him straight away. Victoria stationed herself off to the side to study Felix before conversing with the man that composed the music she ever so loved. In her first impressions, she guessed he was 35 or 36 in age. He had dark hair, lightly curled in wisps. The receding bangs gave him a fine, intellectual forehead. She discerned him to be Jewish, and his stature short yet delicate. Dressing in modest attire, she found herself captivated by his pleasing expression as he shook Albert's hand warmly. Victoria approached Felix as he in turn gave a polite bow. He seemed rather lost in speech, not knowing whether he should speak first. Victoria had a welcoming tone. "It is nice that you were able to make it here. Please take some champagne." "Danke." Felix grabbed a glass. Victoria corrected him in a kind manner. "Do say thank you. Try to keep your speech English. After all, this is England." She glanced at an older servant nearby. They had a grudge over the fact that most of the royal court were of German descent. "Sorry. Thank you." Felix tried his best to pronounce the TH. Victoria smiled in being pleased. Albert rolled his eyes discreetly, then suggested, "Let us not waste time standing here. Let us go to the music room." "I will allow you to escort me." Victoria held her arm towards Felix. Felix gladly held it and followed Albert. They walked a few corridors down, then came to a beautiful open room with a piano. It looked ever so beautiful. The organ sat in the room as well, but that was too loud for the evening. Victoria gestured Felix to sit at the piano. He eagerly seated himself and played right into his Lieder ohne Worte. Victoria and Albert sat in chairs nearby, watching Felix play with such passion. Their ears were comforted at the pieces they formerly played to each other. "Can you give me a theme to improvise on?" Felix questioned after ending a cadence. Victoria suggested, "Rule Britannia." The Austrian anthem, Albert gave his input. Felix began immediately, trying each melody. To start, he added exquisite harmonies to the chosen pieces. The couple had never heard anything so beautiful. In a variant, both themes were blended together and changed over from one to the other. He put such feeling into each variation, with which powerful chords and modulations. At one moment he played the Austrian anthem with the right hand and Rule Britannia with his left. Between Victoria and Albert, they suggested more themes. Each improvisation filled them with the greatest admiration. By the time Felix raised his arms to finish for good, he could hardly keep his eyes open. Victoria stood and escorted him to a chair. "Oh, you poor thing, you are exhausted. You should have said something when we kept making requests." "No, I had a lot of fun." He felt better, resting his fingers and brain. Albert went to the keys and Victoria joined to play a set of Lieder ohne Worte. Felix watched as they duetted to their heart's content, making the music sing with true passion. Since they loved it so much, Felix grabbed an arrangement of his Scottish symphony, which he had transformed into a piano duet. The symphony itself had become increasingly popular after a benefit concert back in June, earning £650 for the sufferers of the Hamburg fire. Victoria and Albert lifted their hands in grace from the keys. Felix handed Victoria the music. "I'd like to give this to you." "Ah, the Scottish symphony. This has to be one of your finest." She glanced it over. "I am happy to dedicate it to you. Scotland is a wonder of a place." Felix recollected his trip to Scotland from 13 years ago. Together, the royal couple studied the arrangement until the evening's end. The time was soon coming for Felix and Cecil to part from England. Cecil showed sadness as she had become best of friends with Charlotte and young Emily. Felix never liked to depart from the smoky nest. There were still a few days yet before the leave was to be, so Prince Albert sent for Felix again, as they had not played the organ. When Felix arrived, he found Albert alone in the music room, organizing various scores on the stand. The room felt fresh from air breezing in from an open window, letting the morning dew of the sun seep in. Albert told Felix with much excitement, "I have many pieces of Bach I think you will enjoy." "Wunderbar," Felix sat at the organ, ready to play. He got excited whenever coming across an organ. Albert chuckled as Felix corrected his language. "Wonderful." He read the first piece sitting at the instrument. It was a 3-part fugue. Albert listened in content as the music was played with ease. Felix then tried experimenting with a few pieces he had been composing. While they were distracted, a gust of wind pressed in from the window, wobbling the music stand beside it. The manuscripts dispersed all over the floor. Victoria entered the room, dressed quite informally for a queen. "Albert, remember we have to leave for Claremont in an hour's time." She then noticed the scattered mess. Heavens, how untidy! The queen got down on her hands and knees, picking up the leaves of paper. Meanwhile, Felix turned to Albert, begging, "Please play me something before you go, so I can tell all of Germany of it." "All right," Albert traded spots with him and played a choral by heart with charm and accuracy. Victoria joined in listening with much pleasure after having picked up the mess. Albert gestured Felix back to the instrument after a piece. Felix sat again and played a section of the St. Paul oratorio. To his joy, the royal couple began singing the chorus together. Albert managed the stops of the organ quite cleverly. The young Prince of Gotha then entered. Felix continued on as the fellow royals spoke together. Their speech had chipper tones. Victoria then turned to Felix as he finished a piece. "Have you any new songs? I am fond of singing the published ones." "You ought to sing one to him," Albert inclined. "I don't know," Victoria became bashful. "Maybe we'll try the spring song in B-flat. That is, if it's still here. All of my music is packed for Claremont." "I will check." Albert rushed off. He was gone a fair amount, then returned. "It's already packed." "Couldn't it possibly be unpacked?" Felix ventured. Victoria gave a sigh. "We must send for Lady M." She rang one of the servant bells. The servants dispatched, but none came with any music. Victoria decided to go herself. While she was away, Albert grabbed a small case sitting on a shelf nearby. He handed it to Felix. "She begs you will accept this gift as a memento." "Dankeschön." Felix opened it to find its contents to be a beautiful ring, on which was engraved V.R. 1842. He tried it on. As he admired the jewelry, the queen came back. Felix put the ring in its case and pocketed it. Victoria explained, "Lady M has gone, and she's taking all of my music with her. It's really most annoying." "Could you pick another song that you know, so I can hear you?" Felix chimed. Victoria looked to her husband. It seemed that she was rather making excuses. Albert assured Felix, "She will sing you something by Gluck." "But let us go to the piano in my room. That one would suit best," Victoria explained as the Princess of Gotha entered. All five in the group proceeded through various rooms and corridors to the Queen's boudoir. There a piano sat in grace. Beside it stood a very plump rocking horse and two large bird cages, one containing a parrot. Felix found where the music was stacked, so flipped through it. He rummaged a while until he found his first set of songs. The Duchess of Kent then joined the group, speaking among them. "Can you sing one of these instead of Gluck?" Felix asked Victoria, interrupting their chatter. "Yes, but first we must get rid of the parrot, or he will scream louder than I can sing," she explained. Albert rang the bell for the servant, but the Prince of Gotha spoke up. "I'll take it out." "Please, allow me," Felix came forward as he wanted to get to the music. He lifted the big bird cage and carried it out. The servants coming up to answer the bell were astonished at the gesture. Felix returned and seated himself at the keys. "Now, what shall you sing?" "I do like Schöner and Schöner schmuckt ich sich." Victoria set the music at the stand. Felix set his hands at the notes and began. When the voice part entered, the Queen sang charmingly. The whole piece went well, with only a small mistake when she sang D when it was to be D sharp. Yet for an amateur, Felix never heard the last sustained G sung more purely or naturally. Victoria smiled after finishing and stated, "That is one of my favorite pieces. You compose so well." "Well," Felix adjusted his cravat, "my sister Fanny actually wrote that one." "Oh, really? You have a sister?" "Yeah. Could we choose one of my pieces now?" "We could try, as long as you help me much," she inquired. Felix nodded and grabbed "Lass dich nur nicht dauern." It was played and sung faultlessly. Felix had much on his mind to say, but it wasn't the moment to indulge in extravagant compliments, so he thanked her well. Victoria sighed. "Oh, if only I hadn't been so frightened. I generally have a pretty long breath." "You did excellent," Felix stated warmly. Albert then skimmed the music and chose Es ist ein Schnitter to sing. His tone had a heartfelt fullness. When it finished, Felix improvised the chorale Albert had played earlier at the organ, mixing it with the melody of the song he just sung. Everyone listened with intrigue at the cleverly interwoven melodies. Usually Felix felt that when he wanted to improvise well, it never turned out as he wished. It would have spoilt his morning, but this time all was pleasing. His fingers gently played to a closing chord, completing the sweet music. "I hope you come back to England again soon and pay us another visit." Victoria smiled. Felix turned to her, assuring, "Don't worry, I shall come back." It was then time for everyone to be on their way. Felix savored his walk to the main doors, which didn't last long. Outside Buckingham, there were many beautiful carriages waiting for the Queen and her company. The palace's flags were lowered, indicating Her Majesty's leave. Felix found a cab for commoners and took it to Clingman's home. The afternoon brought rain, so he rushed through the complex. He knocked at the door, and Carl answered happily. "Cecil is here. She got caught in the rain, too." "I have to talk," Felix pressed in. Cecil sat in the small parlor with a tray of tea. Felix set his coat aside to join and warm himself. Carl grabbed coffee. As soon as he sat, Felix told him everything of the morning's events. After hours of talking, the rain calmed and the sun came out, drying the dewed city. Felix stood and stretched, asking Clingman, "Would you want to go on a stroll with me? I could use the exercise. Cecil, you may join too. I shall be getting back to Chester Place. Charlotte and Emily are almost done sewing a few things." She put on her cloak. The three headed out, but Felix and Carl went their own way up a street. It led to an open field to stroll around. Felix sighed. In a few days, my wife and I are to be back in Berlin. The king is making everything a mess with the academy. I want to go back to Leipzig, anywhere but Berlin. You don't have to be in stress yet. Your brother Paul wrote to me. He and his wife are going to Switzerland and want you and Cecil along. King Frederick has given consent, as there is no progress with the academy. Oh, this is pleasing. Danke, Karl. Felix rushed off to Chester Place to inform Cecil that they would be leaving for Switzerland by morning. In August of 1842, Felix, Paul, and their spouses found themselves in the calming country of Switzerland, staying in Interlaken. The inn happened to be where Felix had previously been refused years prior on his pedestrian tour, as the landlady thought him too shabby. She was now welcoming. It felt as if that tour happened yesteryear ago, but it had been 11 years since his 2-year European excursion. The scenes of the Alps were even better with family. The trip wasn't terribly long, but filled with hiking and beautiful landscapes. It rained at times, but it didn't sour anything. Felix found one of his former guides through the country, Michael. He now had a good strong home with a wife and children. Felix and Paul stayed with them during a long hike. Michael enjoyed singing to his extremely pretty wife. Felix gave the children some trifles and toy soldiers he bought at Untersee when hiking out there. After staying at Michael's residence, Paul and Felix hiked at Grimsel, then headed back to the inn where their wives were. They then moved on from there as Paul wanted to see Zurich. After that, Paul and his wife decided to head back to Berlin. Cecil asked Felix, while packing as well, "Before you and I head back to Berlin, can we stop in Frankfurt to visit my mother?" "I don't know." Felix hesitated. Cecil remarked, "It will keep you out of Berlin longer." "All right," Felix complied. Paul assured before disembarking, "I will inform Herr Masow. If the king requests you, I will write." With that, they went their separate ways. After long weary travel, Felix and Cecil arrived in Frankfurt on a cold downpour. The darkened evening gave a bitter chill. The couple huddled together in the carriage to keep warm. The coachman soon parked at the humble Jean Renaud cottage. Candles were lit inside, indicating the residents were still awake. When pounding at the door, Elizabeth happened to answer. She, in a rush, let the shivering couple inside. They both took off their drenched coats. Elizabeth scolded, "You shouldn't be traveling in such rain." "That's why we came here," Felix stated. Elizabeth went to her daughter and admired her pretty girl, having not seen her in a long while. She then turned to Felix, looking at him intently. "The little of 6 years has definitely aged you." She gazed at his hair, which had receded some. Felix tried to brush the edge of his bangs, not in the likes of her comment. He told her in return, "I see the years have shown on you." "I'm aging well for my age," she smiled in sourness. Since it was late, Elizabeth showed the two to a guest room, where they settled and decided to get much-needed slumber. The light thunder helped drift them to sleep. The next morning at breakfast, a large stack of hot cakes had been made to share. Fresh maple syrup accompanied. While eating, Elizabeth mentioned to Felix, "Your friend Ferdinand Hiller still resides in the city, with his new wife. I shall have to pay a visit. Did he find a girl in Italy?" "I believe so. She sings like an angel." Elizabeth poured some syrup. Felix finished his food, then went on his way to greet his friend, that he had not seen in a while. He resided in the same home as before, as he acquired it from his mother's death. When knocking at the door, Hiller answered. He gave a hard shake of the hand, in greeting. "It's so good of you to visit. Come, bitte." He let Felix in. When entering the sitting-room, a pretty Italian lady sat at the writing desk. Hiller introduced. "Darling, this is my friend Felix that I have talked to you about." "Oh, buongiorno." She turned around. Felix greeted back in her language. "Buongiorno." "You must sing for him," Ferdinand suggested. "He will adore your voice." "I'll accompany at the keys." Hiller went to the piano. Frau Hiller stood and stationed herself beside the instrument. They together bloomed into song. Felix sat, listening to the woman's soft tones. It was perfect. When the piece finished, Fernand told Felix, "There is a favor I'd like to ask." "Ja," Felix was in wonder. Hiller explained, "The painter Karl Muller is in town, and he was going to come sketch my wife. But I'd also like him to sketch you." "Oh, I don't know." Felix felt a pang of self-consciousness. The comments Elizabeth spoke echoed in his mind. He gave Hiller his opinion. "Maybe another time." "Bitte, I have not a sketch of you. If you're worried about your appearance, trust me, you look fine." Hiller tried to convince him. Felix shrugged, but all was interrupted when the bell rang. Fernand went to answer. "That's probably Herr Muller." He came back with a man holding a pencil and sketchbook. As the artist gathered his supplies, Frau Hiller spoke up to him, enticing. "Before you sketch me, my husband and I very much would like a sketch of our friend here." "Bitte," Felix sighed, covering his face. Hiller begged, "Come on, Felix, it's only a sketch. You look fine." "Okay, I'll let a drawing pass, under one condition. Frau Hiller sings through the setting." Felix sat decently to look proper. Hiller went to the piano, and Frau Hiller sang at once. Felix watched her, fazed by her lovely sound. Herr Muller began sketching Felix's expression. The music seemed to fill his heart with a calming joy. It took 16 songs, of various lengths, to complete the sitting. In October, Felix received a letter from Paul, calling him back to Berlin. Felix sighed upon reading the letter, but informed Cecil. Though they stayed in Frankfurt for a month, it felt short-lived. Traveling in the mid-autumn wasn't fun. The leaves were a pretty yellow, but the cold blast forced them to make many stops to find a hot stove. They missed the warm cottage in Frankfurt. To shelter for a night, they found a small ruddy inn. Cecil huddled in the bed, trying to keep warm. The room had a chill dreariness to it, with the woodwork looking bitter with frost. Felix sat at the writing desk, wearing his coat and wool gloves. He was reading a letter he received on the road. It was from a man who enjoyed his Lieder ohne Worte, and had a question on Felix's thoughts, comparing words to music. Felix penned a reply, giving his feelings. Dear Marc-André Suchet, there is so much talk about music, and yet so little really said. I believe words do not suffice for such a purpose, and if I found they did suffice, then I certainly would have nothing more to do with music. People often complain that music is ambiguous, that their ideas on the subject always seem so vague, whereas everyone understands words. With me it is exactly the reverse, not merely with regard to entire sentences, but also as to individual words. These too seem to me so ambiguous, so vague, so unintelligible when compared with genuine music, which fills the soul with 1,000 things better than words, because the words of one person assume a totally different meaning in the mind of another, because the music of the song alone can awaken the same ideas and the same feelings in one mind as another, a feeling which is not, however, expressed by the same words. Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy. After he finished penning the letter, Cecil begged, "It's so cold in here and getting late. Please come to bed." "I'll put more wood in the fireplace first." He grabbed his letter, then grabbed a few logs by the hearth, settling them into the kindling fire. After the fire heated more, Felix laid in bed next to Cecil. She scooted over, but the bed was not meant for two. They both were nearly falling off. Felix blew out the candle after they seemed somewhat settled. After the room darkened, Felix huddled in the blanket, hoarding it. Cecil pulled it back, making her the one hoarding it. Felix turned over, trying to get comfortable, but it moved the blanket again. Cecil snapped, "Stop taking the blanket." "I hardly have any of it," Felix groaned. Cecil fluffed her pillow in annoyance. In Felix's tossing about, he accidentally kicked her. She in turn hit him on the shoulder. "Ow!" Felix snapped. Cecil huddled closer to stop his irritation. Felix managed to get some shut-eye, while Cecil gave a breath of relief. She began to lightly dream of frolicking, sweet-smelling flower fields, picking lilies and roses. Yet her fragrant dreams were distastefully disrupted when a bursting loud fart echoed in the room. She gave a small sigh, ignoring it, until the stench caused her to sit up. "Felix, really?" She looked at him. He was snoring, but a smirk formed on his face. Cecil rolled her eyes and went to sleep. The next morning, Felix awoke with an aching back. He sat up to notice he was on the hardwood floor, having fallen out of bed. Cecil had the entire bed to herself. He gave a huff and stood back up. Cecil awoke soon after and asked, "Get enough sleep?" "In truth, 9. At least today we will be back in Berlin. I'm only pleased to get there as to be in a good bed." Felix packed up their things. As soon as Cecil got out of bed and dressed, they left the cold inn. Back in Berlin, Felix stood before King Frederick. His Majesty was at his throne in thought as usual, not speaking a word. Felix piped up, "So what progress has been made?" "The academy positions still need to be filled." "So nothing has changed?" Felix stared at him. The king huffed a sigh, giving a suspense that Felix could not stand. He inquired, "Why can I not go somewhere that offers work? Leipzig is where I feel most at home. My family is happy there. I feel useless in Berlin." "So you're saying I'm not offering a sustainable job for you?" The king's tone was displeased. Felix was quick to deny. "9, I'm trying to think for my family's happiness." "Well, before you speak to me any more of wanting to leave, discuss the matter with your brother and Herr Massau. I will then call you back here." He gestured Felix to leave. His actions were rather careless. Felix left calmly, but inside his blood boiled. When Felix returned to the estate, Cecil saw him walk in with disparity. She asked, "How was it?" "He wants me to talk to Paul and Herr Massau. They will only try to convince me to stay. The king didn't even want to hear my plan. No matter how angry it makes the man, we are leaving in 8 days' time." He hugged Cecil. Leah rushed into the entryway upon eavesdropping. "You had better not leave me so soon." "Mutter, we must." Felix felt a terrible pain at seeing his mother in such distraught. She usually was calm and seldom, giving only glimpses of her inner feelings, but now her sorrow showed greatly. Felix felt as if his heart was being crushed within him, as Leah embraced him with sobs. He hugged her, then went to go find Paul. Fortunately, his brother was coming down the stairs upon hearing his mother's tears. He questioned, "What is the matter with Mutter?" "I told her my family and I are leaving in 8 days." "Does the king approve?" "He sent me off to talk to you and Massau. I've made up my mind. I'm not letting you try to sway my plan." Felix put his hands on his hips. Paul sighed. "All right, I will inform Herr Massau." The next day, Felix went back to the king's residence, in the company with Herr Massau. Felix feared that he'd be facing the king's anger, yet to his surprise, they found him in good humor. He greeted Felix kindly. "How is my musician getting along today? In a better spirit than last time?" "I have come to give my farewells." Felix stood sternly. "In a week hence, I am returning to Leipzig, with my family, to continue my duties there. To fill the request here, I am sure there is another man perfect for it." He finished his simple speech. The king sat in thought, then replied, "I know I cannot compel you to remain, but it will give me heartfelt regret if you leave me. The plans I had for you are now frustrated. You leave a void that can't be filled. Yet if you name any capable person that can execute plans as you could, then send them to me, and I will entrust them. But I believe you will be unable to name anyone I could approve of." As the king continued into much detail, Felix felt he was being put on the spot. King Frederick topped off his speech with the cherry-bell gilting. "I also hear that your mother is so disappointed that you are going so soon. It must hurt so much to see her in such a state." Felix subconsciously clutched his chest, feeling the ache in his heart. In truth, he did not care a thing about the king's opinion, but seeing his mother crying, he could not stand. It was the only kink in his plan. The king was doing anything to get to Felix. "How about I return to Leipzig, as I planned, and when this academy is fully in progress, I mean in seriousness, then I will return." Felix gave a stern statement. King Frederick nodded. "I will approve of your leave, but you are not near out of duty to me. There are commissions that I require. A few plays that I enjoy need some incidental music. I will write these requests so as you don't forget them. The ones I want done are Oedipus, Clonius, and the Midsummer Night's Dream. You have an overture done for the Midsummer, but it needs music throughout it. I will stay in your service and fulfill these commissions. Felix bowed politely. Before leaving, Frederick added, "And one more thing. Since you are leaving, I hope you haven't used up the $3,000 that I paid you. I need half of it back, since my original ideas have not been seen." "I'll get it to you," Felix sighed within. They then separated after an hour and a quarter conversation. While heading out through the main halls, Herr Marcel skipped in excitement, repeating happily to Felix, "Surely you can never now think of going away with these new commissions." "I've already made my decision. I can adhere to the king's proposals in Leipzig." Felix walked ahead of him. Marcel stopped his jolly stature and followed in a huff. At home, Felix wrote the necessary letters to give up half of the salary given to him. Cecil had known the whole thing too good to be true all along. Felix was relieved that he had not spent the extra money. When business was finished, Felix grabbed a few pages and wrote a long letter to Ignaz, describing everything that happened. His pen he let run away with words. He needed someone to vent to. Yet he couldn't write too much, as Cecil wanted the next page. Little did Felix know, Ignaz had exciting plans of his own.